Let me show you the outside of Buckingham Palace, where the flag is lowered as it's been announced that the Duchess of Kent, the cousin of Queen Elizabeth and wife of the Duke of Kent, has died. She was 92.
The passing of the Duchess of Kent has left a deep mark on the royal family and all who admired her. A woman known for grace, quiet strength, and her devotion to music and young people, Catherine's life touched many beyond palace walls. Now, at her funeral, King Charles's tribute has drawn powerful attention. His words did more than honor her memory. They revealed the lasting impact she carried within the family. What exactly did Charles say that left people calling it stunning? Join us as we explore Duchess of Kent Katharine's funeral and King Charles's heartfelt tribute. A life of strength. The funeral of Catherine, Duchess of Kent, has reminded Britain of a remarkable life that began far from the grand halls of Buckingham Palace. But while we reflect on the moving tribute King Charles gave in her honor, it is worth stepping back to see how her story first unfolded. Catherine Lucy Mary Worsley was born on the 22nd of February 1933 at Hovingham Hall, a Georgian country house that had belonged to her family for generations. Her father, Sir William Arthington Worsley, was the fourth baronet, known as a country gentleman with a steady reputation. Her mother, Joyce Brunner, came from a German banking family, bringing another layer of culture into the household. Together they raised 4 children, with Catherine the only daughter among 3 brothers. Life at Hovingham Hall was ordered, but never cold. There were governesses, games in the grounds, and an atmosphere where tradition met curiosity. The hall itself was a character in her childhood, with its long corridors, grand library, and the family chapel that rooted her in faith. Catherine's education began at Queen Margaret's School in York, where she was seen as diligent but not boastful. Later she studied at Runton Hill in Norfolk, and what stood out most was her devotion to music. Teachers noticed that she often sat at the piano long after classes ended, practicing pieces with quiet focus. Her love of music led her to Miss Hubler's School of Music in Oxford, where she trained seriously. Friends remembered her as gentle but determined, someone who could lose herself in the sound of Beethoven or Mozart. That passion never faded, even as life pushed her towards a very different stage. The war years shaped her family too. Hovingham Hall, like many estates, adapted to the times. Airmen were billeted in the area, and rationing touched even households like hers. Catherine grew up with a sense of duty that was expected of her generation. It gave her a kind of steadiness that people around her always remarked upon. She was approachable, not distant, which later made her stand out among the royals. Her path to meeting Prince Edward, Duke of Kent, came through family and society links. Edward, born in 1935 and a cousin of Queen Elizabeth II, moved in circles that occasionally overlapped with the Worsleys. Their families were both part of Britain's landed traditions, though Edward's life was tied directly to the crown. Their first meetings in the 1950s were modest by royal standards. Dinners, gatherings, and charity events where Catherine's quiet grace drew notice. Unlike some young women dazzled by royal company, she remained grounded. At that point, she was a young woman rooted in Yorkshire, in love with music, and raised in a household that valued both discipline and kindness. Nothing about her suggested she would one day become a duchess and spend more than 60 years as part of the royal family. Yet that was where the road was leading. The girl who once practiced piano at Hovingham Hall was stepping closer to a life that would change not only her name, but also her role in the story of the monarchy. In June 1961, the life Catherine Worsley had known at Hovingham Hall transformed into a moment of history. On the 8th of that month, she married Prince Edward, Duke of Kent, in a ceremony at York Minster. It was the first royal wedding to be held there in more than 600 years, and the setting was chosen with care. York was her home county, and she wanted the people of Yorkshire to share in the moment. The cathedral's soaring Gothic arches, filled with music and pageantry, made it a scene that captured the nation's imagination. The bride wore a gown designed by John Kavanagh, crafted in white silk with a full skirt and a train that swept down the aisle. Her veil was held in place by a diamond bandeau tiara lent by her mother-in-law, Princess Marina. Around her stood bridesmaids, including Princess Anne, who at that time was still a young girl. The Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh were there, as were the Queen Mother and the rest of the royal family. The scale of the wedding marked Catherine's full entrance into royal life. For the people watching, she became the Duchess of Kent in that instant. But behind the titles and formality, she also became Edward's partner in a life that mixed duty with family. As Duke and Duchess of Kent, they set up home in Kensington Palace, where their 3 children would later be raised. George, who became Earl of St. Andrews, Lady Helen Taylor, and Lord Nicholas Windsor. Each child grew up with a mother who took seriously both her role as Duchess and her role at home. Catherine attended school concerts, looked after her children's studies, and still found time to accompany her husband on engagements. Her duties as a royal duchess expanded quickly. She supported Edward in his role as president of the All England Lawn Tennis Club, which meant Wimbledon became a familiar part of her summers. She also undertook royal tours abroad, opening hospitals, meeting communities, and building a reputation for warmth rather than grandeur. People who met her often said she spoke to them as if she had known them before. That quality, rooted in her Yorkshire upbringing, never left her. In those years, she also became part of the same extended royal family framework that included Prince Charles, then a young man preparing for his own life of service. Family gatherings often brought them together. Christmases at Sandringham, summers at Balmoral, and state occasions where the younger royals shared the same stage as their elders. Catherine's presence was steady and supportive, and Charles, who valued family ties, grew up knowing her not as a distant duchess, but as a trusted relative within the fold. Balancing her royal responsibilities with her private world was not always easy. She faced the same challenges as many mothers, but under the eyes of the public. Yet Catherine handled it with a calmness that became her trademark. She knew how to move from the formality of a palace reception to the informality of helping with homework or listening to her children's stories at bedtime. And, as we'll reveal next, her ability to move between both worlds gave her a quiet strength the monarchy came to depend on. A life of dignity. What began in York, Minster in 1961, was the start of a life that would tie Catherine more deeply into the monarchy, both as Duchess of Kent and as part of the royal family's story in the modern era. As Duchess of Kent, Catherine never sought the spotlight, yet her actions made her unforgettable. Where others shone in glittering ceremonies, she quietly found purpose in the causes she supported. At schools across the country, she visited classrooms and listened to pupils who rarely saw a royal figure. Teachers often recalled her willingness to sit among the children, asking about their interests, rather than delivering a rehearsed speech and leaving. Her approach carried the same simplicity that had defined her upbringing. She wasn't content with appearing supportive. She wanted to be present, human, and real. Music remained the thread running through much of her public work. For Catherine, it wasn't just about concerts in grand halls. She believed music could change a child's life, even if that child never set foot on a stage. That conviction grew into one of her most important legacies: the creation of Future Talent in 2004, a charity she co-founded to help young musicians from disadvantaged backgrounds. It provided instruments, lessons, and mentoring to children who might otherwise have been left behind. But her service was not limited to long-term projects. She left her mark in unforgettable moments of compassion. One of the most famous came at Wimbledon in 1993. Jana Novotná, a talented Czech player, had just lost the women's singles final to Steffi Graf. Overwhelmed with emotion, she broke down on the court. Katharine, who had been presenting the trophies, instinctively reached out to comfort her, drawing her into an embrace. Cameras captured the image, and it spread across the world. It was a moment of empathy that went beyond royal duty. She was not standing on ceremony. She was being human, in the most visible arena possible. This side of Katharine struck a chord with Charles, who had always valued the arts and believed they could heal and inspire. He often spoke about the importance of creativity in education, and in Katharine he saw a relative who shared that passion, not in theory, but in practice. Their conversations about music and art were said to be warm and thoughtful, with Charles admiring her dedication to nurturing talent rather than chasing recognition. The two often crossed paths at cultural events, and while their roles differed, they shared the belief that the arts could bridge divides and uplift communities. By the mid-1990s, the Duchess of Kent made choices that startled many but revealed the depth of her character. In 1994, she converted to Roman Catholicism, a decision that carried great weight within the monarchy. Since the time of the Glorious Revolution in 1688, the royal family had been tied to the Church of England. For a royal duchess to openly embrace Catholicism was almost unheard of. Yet for Katharine, it was not about making a statement, it was about faith. She had always carried a quiet spirituality, shaped by her upbringing at Hovingham Hall and the challenges she faced in adult life. After years of reflection, she found herself drawn more to the Catholic Church. Her decision was guided by conviction, not ceremony. It marked her as the first senior royal to convert publicly since 1701, making headlines at the time. While some observers debated its implications, those who knew her understood it as an act of honesty. She wanted her faith to match her heart. 2 years later, in 1996, Katharine stepped further away from royal expectations. She withdrew from many of her public duties and chose to work as a music teacher in Hull. She was known simply as Mrs. Kent to many of her students. The humility of that move struck people. Royals often talk about service, but Katharine lived it in a way that stripped away privilege. Her empathy shone through these choices. She had known struggles herself through periods of ill health and times when the pressures of royal life weighed heavily. Rather than retreating into silence, she turned those struggles into compassion. She wanted to give back in the most practical way she could. These decisions did not go unnoticed by Charles. He had long spoken of the importance of following one's conscience, even when it ran against expectation. Katharine's conversion and her teaching role embodied that principle. He admired those who could stand by personal conviction with dignity. Her choices resonated with his own belief that faith and the arts were tied to the soul of a person. Even as she aged, Katharine remained close to her husband, the Duke of Kent. They had weathered storms together, and in her later years, their bond grew even stronger. Their marriage had lasted more than 6 decades, and she often reminded family that true companionship was found in small gestures, walking together through the palace gardens, sharing tea, or sitting in silence while the afternoon sun poured through tall windows. It was in these ordinary moments that she found the most meaning. Younger royals like Prince William and Catherine, the Princess of Wales, often noted how much respect she commanded despite living largely outside the spotlight. To them, she was not just the Duchess of Kent, but an anchor who represented steadiness in a family constantly under scrutiny. In October 2024, the public saw her for the final time. It was her husband Prince Edward's 89th birthday, and despite her frail health, she insisted on attending. Her Catholic faith remained strong until the end. The Duchess of Kent aged with the same dignity she had carried throughout her life. She let the world see only what she wished, but behind palace walls, she lived with devotion to family, faith, and the music that had always defined her spirit. She passed away peacefully on September 4th, 2025, at the age of 92. The news, confirmed by Buckingham Palace, struck a deep chord across Britain. She had long been a quiet presence in royal life, but her death reminded the nation of her remarkable journey. In keeping with her faith, her passing set in motion arrangements unlike any other in modern royal history. A Catholic funeral for a senior member of the family. For centuries, Catholic rites had been absent from the funerals of royals, owing to Britain's long history of religious division. But Catherine's wishes were clear, and the king himself approved them without hesitation. Her farewell would be marked by a solemn requiem mass, a service rich in ritual and music, reflecting her lifelong devotion. The day of her final journey began at Kensington Palace, her home for more than 50 years. Her coffin, draped in her personal standard, was carried out through the palace gates, lined with staff who had served her faithfully. Many wept quietly, remembering her kindness in private moments. A small procession followed the hearse as it made its way through London streets, bound for Westminster Cathedral. The choice of the cathedral, the mother church of Catholics in England and Wales, carried huge significance. At Westminster Cathedral, crowds had gathered since dawn. Many were ordinary Londoners who remembered her support for children's charities or her encouragement of young musicians. Some carried flowers, others held rosaries. Inside, a vigil was kept, candles burning softly around her coffin as priests led prayers. Members of the royal family filed in through a side entrance: King Charles, Queen Camilla, the Prince and Princess of Wales, Princess Anne, and others, each bowing their heads respectfully as they passed her casket. The Requiem Mass began with soaring choral music, a fitting tribute for a woman who had built her life around melody and harmony. The cathedral choir sang their notes echoing through the great arches. The Archbishop of Westminster presided, joined by clergy from both Catholic and Anglican traditions. It was more than a funeral. It was a moment of unity, bridging faiths while honoring a woman who had never been afraid to live by her beliefs. After the Mass, the coffin was taken from Westminster Cathedral in a solemn procession. Crowds outside fell silent as the cortege passed. The journey ended at Windsor, where Catherine was laid to rest at Frogmore Royal Burial Ground. It was here, in the grounds near St. George's Chapel, that generations of royals had been buried. From Kensington to Westminster, and finally to Frogmore, the farewell of Catherine, Duchess of Kent, was as dignified as the life she had led. But even before she was laid to rest, tributes were already pouring in, including one from King Charles. A royal farewell. When Buckingham Palace announced her death, the royal family quickly began the official ceremonies. Flags were lowered to half-mast over Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, and other royal residences. It was the same gesture seen after the death of senior members of the family, a mark of respect for a duchess who had been part of the monarchy for more than 60 years. At Kensington Palace, where Catherine had lived since her marriage, tributes soon appeared at the gates. Floral arrangements and notes from the public joined the wreaths placed by staff and well-wishers. The palace became a focus of remembrance in the days before her funeral. For the royal family, mourning carried both duty and personal grief. Catherine was a cousin by marriage to King Charles III and a familiar figure at family events over decades. He led the family through the period with a careful balance of protocol and compassion. Buckingham Palace released official notices in his name, while he also made time to attend the key services himself. On the eve of the funeral, a vigil was held at Westminster Cathedral, where the Duchess's coffin was placed before the altar. King Charles and Queen Camilla were present, joined by Princess Anne, the Duke of York, and the Earl of Wessex. The Prince and Princess of Wales also attended. Catharine's children were at the center of the family group, supported by their spouses and children. The sight of the king inside Westminster Cathedral was not without significance. As Supreme Governor of the Church of England, Charles carries a role tied directly to Anglican tradition. His attendance at a Catholic vigil underlined the unity of the family and the respect held for Catharine's personal faith. It also reflected Charles's long-standing emphasis on religious tolerance. Throughout his public life, he has spoken about the need for understanding between faiths, and his presence here was a natural extension of those words. During the vigil, Cardinal Vincent Nichols, Archbishop of Westminster, led prayers for the Duchess. The service was attended by representatives of charities and organizations she had supported, particularly from the worlds of education and music. Tributes from Future Talent, the charity she co-founded in 2004 to support young musicians from less privileged backgrounds, were especially highlighted. The organization credited her with years of dedication and described her as a champion for young people. Outside the cathedral, crowds gathered to witness the moment. Members of the public stood silently as the royal family entered, many holding flowers. Television coverage carried the images across the country, showing the mixture of tradition and personal sorrow that defined the occasion. For Charles, the days around the funeral demonstrated both his duty as monarch and his closeness to the family. His leadership through grief was marked not by words at first, but by respect until the moment of his personal tribute arrived. When Buckingham Palace released the official statement, for instance, it was clear that the words carried the personal touch of King Charles. The notice confirmed that Charles and Queen Camilla were standing alongside Prince Edward, Duke of Kent, and his family in mourning. The statement praised Catharine's lifelong dedication to service. It spoke of her work in education and music, causes she had never abandoned even when she stepped back from royal duties. For Charles, these were traits he had seen in his cousin over decades, at family events and in public life. When his tribute was read in full, the details struck a chord. Charles mentioned her passion for music, a nod to the years she had given to supporting young musicians through her work with Future Talent and other charities. He also spoke of her kindness to young people, reminding the nation of moments when she had chosen to stand beside those often overlooked. For Charles, these themes were not chosen by chance. He too has long been an advocate for the arts, education, and interfaith understanding. By emphasizing Catharine's music, her empathy, and her faith, he was also pointing to the shared values that had connected them. Those listening could sense that this was more than a monarch performing duty. It was a cousin remembering someone whose life had quietly influenced his own. The weight of his words was felt across Britain. Newspapers carried the tribute on their front pages. Broadcasters played clips of his message, alongside images of Catherine at Wimbledon, at schools, and in church. It marked Catherine not only as a senior royal, but as an individual whose character had left an impression on those around her. Music schools and foundations across the country echoed the sentiment, many recalling visits she had made or concerts she had attended. The Musicians' Union released a message praising her support for disadvantaged children in the arts. In the end, what made Charles's tribute stand out was not grand words, but honesty. He honored a duchess who chose her own path and showed the values he holds: duty, kindness, and faith. For many, it was one of the most sincere moments of his reign, and a reminder that even in royalty, grief is very human. What do you think about the life and legacy of Catherine, Duchess of Kent? Do you believe King Charles's tribute captured the true essence of who she was? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear them. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the following video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.